Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I'm your host, Ray Alvarez, and with me, as always, is Brian Foster. I didn't give any of our credentials. We'll get there, though, Brian. We're going to be talking all things NBA. We're going to be talking Kawhi leaving San Antonio. We're going to be talking Hassan Whiteside knowing what's up, the most insane Nuggets game ever, and why esports athletes are getting paid more than NBA G League athletes, and whatever else comes to our head. How's it going, Brian?
Oh, it's going, Dre. Yeah, it's funny. We were kind of talking about how it's getting near the end of the season and we got playoffs and playoff position coming up soon. But we'll talk about that in coming weeks. But there's a lot more economics kind of stuff and a lot of interesting topics this week.
Do you mind if I call an audible and just pull one of our kind of more innocuous topics first to bring up your point about playoff season?
Put it on the top. Let's put it on the
All
top.
Right. So this game, if this was an April Fool's Day joke, I wouldn't disbelieve you. So for those of you that don't know, and I don't fault you because it's funny, I've lived in both of these states, but neither Wisconsin nor Denver deserves a sports team. Denver's a little more interesting because they are a decent-sized market, but Denver has a basketball team, a hockey team, a football team, I think a lacrosse team, I think a soccer team. I think they're all still there. Several big college programs. They just are not a big market to sustain that many teams. So the point being, Milwaukee doesn't deserve an NBA team. Denver doesn't deserve an NBA team. They are both small markets. And yet they had one of the most absurd NBA games ever on April 1st. And that's why I'm saying I wouldn't have disbelieved it was an April Fool's joke. In fact, I was making fun of the Nuggets. What happened this night is I believe two other teams in the West. And so the reason I pushed this number one, Brian, is what you just said. I believe, and I haven't checked tonight's game, so it's obviously changed a little, but two games separate like the 4th seed and the 9th seed out west right now, which is awesome and terrifying for many reasons heading into the playoffs. The Denver Nuggets play the Minnesota Timberwolves 2 games down the stretch. So that alone could dictate who's in or who's out. But so on April 1st, 2 teams in the West lost their game. And so that meant the Nuggets, they have a shot. The Nuggets have a shot of making a playoff push. And they were down, I think at the peak, I think it was 18 points. It looks like the Bucks had an 18-point lead. Yeah, the according to Popcorn Machine, the Bucks had an 18-point lead about midway through the fourth quarter, or not midway, more like quarter of the way through the fourth quarter. And not only did they manage to blow it, they were up 8 points with a minute to go. That was when I was like, you know what? 8 points with a minute to go. You can start making fun of the team. You can start filing for the exits. You know, you can beat traffic, but no, gets even nuttier. With, I think, somewhere between 10 to 5 seconds to go, the Bucks are up by 3. The Bucks have the ball. The Bucks mess up an inbound pass, and then they foul Jamal Murray on a 3-point shot. And that manages to tie the game and send it to overtime. And also, in that stretch of time at the end of the fourth quarter, Giannis Antetokounmpo fouls out of the game. And this is not a surprising thing. This is what we've been saying. Basically, that team is Giannis. And actually, Brian, I don't know how easy it is for you to go to Basketball Reference and look up the box score of that game. It was on April 1st. It was the Denver Nuggets versus the Milwaukee Bucks. A phrase Brian inadvertently came up with is Tony Snell does nothing well. You weren't trying to rhyme, but it's to this day one of my most favorite things. If you look at his, I'm going to try and get it up in front of me. I'm obviously stalling. I'm not very fast at this, unfortunately. But his stat line for that game, which was an overtime game, which he is a starter, is ludicrously bad. That team is entirely not the Denver Nuggets, is entirely Giannis. That team without Giannis is nothing. And in that game, Giannis went 7 for 13, 12 rebounds, 6 assists, did get 4 turnovers. Tony Snell, though, in 33 minutes of play, got 3 points on 5 shots, no rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 4 personal fouls. Yikes. But that's all. I at least had to, as I mentioned, because they're both small market teams, and they're both, the Bucks are going to make the playoffs, but I expect they'll be gone in the first round. And it's and the Denver Nuggets, even if they make the playoffs, they're probably going to die in the first round. This is one of the most absurd NBA games I can think of. Now, I mean, there are tons of NBA games. I'm sure if I got a smart machine algorithm going through all the play-by-plays, we'd have, almost 20 years of data to go through. There have got to be nuttier ones. Obviously, the Tracy McGrady, I think, 13 points in 8 seconds game is one of the nuttiest ones.
That's a classic.
I think I watch that like once a year. I think, I just end up going to YouTube and watching that once a year. This has got to be one of the nuttiest games in NBA regular season history. Nuttiest fourth quarter, nuttiest 10 minutes.
Well, Eric Bledsoe looks pretty good in this game. Yeah, I mean, there's been so many great games. Like, we're going to get towards the end of the show to, like, the women's Final Four as well. Like, man, this is a heck of a time of the year for basketball, Dre.
Well, interesting. Let's just give a shout out to, I don't know the articles off the top of the head, and I haven't really been doing show notes. What I've just been doing is releasing on iTunes and YouTube, and it seems to be getting roughly the same traffic, so I don't know how much my articles were helping. But I got to give a shout out to Dave Barry and Jessica Luther. Dave Barry, of course, for his great piece that still is most popular on Forbes about, maybe the fix to women's sports is to give it more coverage as opposed to worrying about if a dominant team wins. And then we should also point out, I believe in men's college hoops, a dominant team won. So then Jessica Luther was also saying that this year's Final Four for women's NCAA basketball was incredible, was remarkable, had some of the most amazing, I think on YouTube as well, the little videos that play on Twitch. I sound like such an old person. Watch some of those. I don't remember all the players' names, but some amazing last-second shots, heartbreaking games, amazing narratives. Whereas the men's, after I think Baltimore went down, I think Villanova. I don't know the teams, Brian. I didn't watch men's basketball at all.
You got it. Villanova is our national champ now.
Okay, yeah, but so they kept through. There's another team that they took out, whatever. But after those teams fell through, it was just very boring. It was very this dominant squad as usual wins. It's like Jessica Luther wrote a good post. It's like, it's great that this nun that was rooting for a team in the men's Final Four got a lot of attention. Why don't you give similar attention to women's college hoops, which I can't disagree with. It's a good product.
Yeah. So just to your point, I'm getting ready for the NBA playoffs now that NCAA is done. And I'm, with considering all the great teams that we've had the last few years that have continued into this year, it's going to be a good playoffs, I think. I'm really excited for it. But anyway.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, I still think, and I cannot, we talked about this, I just got to ping this one, then we'll get into Kawhi. I cannot believe I am on board this quickly. I think I'm going to call the Hinkie 76ers, and let's be clear, the 76ers this year are Hinkie's effing 76ers. It's Joel Embiid, or it's Ben Simmons, hands down, right? Ben Simmons is the most amazing rookie. I haven't looked back far enough, Brian. I've got to believe he's the most amazing rookie on a team that's actually going to make the playoffs since Magic Johnson. I'm trying to find more recent, like Michael Jordan made the playoffs as a rookie, but his team.
How good was Tim Duncan as a rookie?
Oh, interesting. Sorry. Apologies to Tim Duncan. Obviously Tim Duncan was the answer we were looking for. So let's look that up. Tim Duncan.
I don't know, obviously, but it's a potential.
I don't want to be mean. I'm just saying I gave the sense. And obviously, Tim Duncan is more recent than Magic Johnson, and obviously he was an amazing rookie. So let's take a look. 1998, interesting, Brian. You may have forced a post. Tim Duncan in 1998, 14 wins produced. This season, according to our numbers, with all the position adjustment fixes, etc., Ben Simmons is going to be. I think he's like top 5 in the NBA right now, isn't he? Top 10. He is at 15.2 wins produced. Fascinating, Brian. That is fascinating.
It's going to be close.
Ben Simmons is a better rookie than Tim Duncan right now. And I believe, right, Tim Duncan, let's stay on some tangents, Brian. Let's stay off target. Getting into
You would never succeed a Death Star trench run, Dre.
I know. Well, I would live. Let's point that out, right? How many people, let's compare the Death Star trench run to my point about the 76ers that I've made before. Even if you agree that the plan worked, and I'm tenuous, I think this is the best universe scenario. If you're looking at multiverse, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons being what they are, Robert Covington having the breakout season he did at the time he did. Well, Embiid was still injured and Simmons was ramping up. All of this stuff playing out the way it did is like the best universe. If you're giving me a distribution of universes for how the 76ers were going to look after Sam Hinkie's initial plan, this has got to be top 10% at minimum. But anyway, nobody won in the tanking plan. Most of the rookies, Nerlens Noel and Jahlil Okafor, got screwed out of better contracts because in the normal tanking process, they're going to be the franchise player for some tanking team. They're going to get major minutes, but because of how they were doing things, Jahlil Okafor resulted in Nerlens Noel getting benched. They could trout Jahlil Okafor, and then Embiid getting healthy resulted in them benching Jahlil Okafor. So we keep pointing us out about how teams fall for things. This is our Donovan Mitchell point. Teams don't realize that basically minutes and shot attempts are what drives their perception of players. And we're arguing that the players you want to look at are the ones that are getting underplayed, undervalued. Joe Ingles is a great example. He's actually getting paid reasonably decent in the modern CBA, but he's still an undervalued asset. And Joe Ingles is a player where you go, this guy taking 3-3-point shots a game, this is on Utah, was shooting 44%. This season, he's shooting 5 3-point shots a game, 44%. Even if you believe in the effing usage curve, bullshit you don't believe he can't shoot 37 to 38% from three on maybe 7 to 10 shots a game. He's an underrated asset. But what people will do is they will simply look at the players that get more minutes or more shots. And so Jahlil Okafor and Nerlens Noel both got screwed because their minutes were down. And people go, oh, they're not that good. They're below 10 points per game. Well, they're below 10 points per game because they're playing 15 minutes a game or they're coming off the bench. So they got screwed. Hinkie got screwed. The fans got screwed those 4 years. The people that are going to win are like billionaire owners who already get tax subsidies and like the savvy politicking front office people, the Colangelos, who managed to politic their way to taking control of the team right before it was going to take off. So it's like nobody wins. And the same was true like the Death Star trench run, right? Like how many people that like succeeded doing that other than like Luke and Han, like the wingmen died, everybody died. It's like, if you're not Luke, you're dead. So it's kind of,
well, to your point, the guy who said stay on target, I think was Red Leader, and he died by staying on target.
Exactly.
However, Wedge flied clear because he was damaged and he lived throughout all the movies.
But I'll take it. I know I'm not Luke Skywalker, but I will take being Wedge Antilles, or Antilles, however you say his name. So right, that is the best compliment in the Star Wars universe I've ever had. But no, the 76ers are looking freaking fantastic, and Ben Simmons is a better rookie. And I think I can't believe how on board they're Russell Westbrook 2.0, where I'm on board with them. So I just have to shout that out, where going into the playoffs, I'm really fascinated. I think they have the best shot. And I was told by gamblers, for those of you that listen to the show regularly, Brian and I got into a brief discussion where basically I said, I think the 76ers, if we're looking at contenders, which would be like the top 4 teams in each conference, I think the 76ers, provided Joel Embiid comes back healthy, or even close to healthy, which should be okay, right? It wasn't his legs. He got his face bashed in, essentially. So he basically has concussion protocol and has to get the bones around his eyes have to heal up. I've got to believe he can come back from that. A lot of his game is predicated on athleticism. So I think they're fine as long as they can get out of the first round, which I think they should be able to. If they're the 4th or 5th seed, I have no fear of them getting out of the first round. 3rd seed is just gravy. I can't believe how on board I am with them already, but Brian was like, Toronto's the better team. Their SRS is freaking amazing. He's not wrong. If those two teams come up against each other in the playoffs, we're going to have a bet. Basically, I took even money from Brian on that series. Essentially, not officially, like we didn't sign a contract, but if there's some rule of podcast on air,
even money bragging rights, right? That's what we
exactly.
Have.
Someone can come up to that podcast and say this is what you said. So we'll have to make that bet. I was basically told online by smarter people than me that was a dumb decision, but hopefully we get there. So I'm excited about that.
Charles Barkley agrees with you. By the way, he said that because the Eagles and Villanova both won, that Philadelphia is impossible to beat, so therefore the 76ers will also win the title this year.
I was actually unaware of where Villanova was, so they're
from Pennsylvania.
All right, well, cool. All right, so let's talk Kawhi. This is fascinating on many fronts. So we just talked about some of the contenders. Let's talk about, first off, let's give a moment of silence to the San Antonio Spurs. I don't know if I don't have a good like Moneyball name for them, but whatever that era, the Moneyball era of the Spurs, I think we can officially call it dead or over. They might be entering a new era. I'm not saying the Spurs won't be a good team, but people don't realize that the Spurs are to the NBA as the Oakland A's are to baseball in terms of analytics, etc. And we can actually make the argument that the Spurs knew what the hell they were doing. And there's even some argument that the A's didn't. One of my favorite chapters in Moneyball is Billy Beane gets upset during a losing streak, and he trades away a bunch of his players, including Jason Giambi's younger brother. And I believe it's Jeremy Giambi, right?
Correct, Jeremy.
I didn't know that. Brian's told me that on air before, so I'll keep saying it until it comes up. And later in the book, he admits that was a mistake. He basically says that didn't matter. It was an emotional thing. You could argue the Spurs have made more stay-the-course, analytics-driven moves than the Oakland A's did. And they were fantastic. I believe since David Robinson was drafted, or a year or two after that, they were whatever, I think it's like 80%, whatever 55-win team, including the 2 lockout seasons were, they were a 55-win team for a humongous stretch of time, 50-win team through that stretch of time, and they're not going to win 50 games this season. And it looks like you did it perfectly. I don't know if it's the Bleacher Report title, but vultures are circling over Kawhi. You list a lot of good articles here. You list Bleacher Report. You list a few others. Here's what's fascinating. I didn't realize you asked me to read some of the articles. Basically, what you were saying might be happening and might be not the cause, maybe not. So Kawhi might be unhappy in San Antonio. Apparently, I wasn't aware of this at all until you brought it to my attention, Brian. Kawhi is in talks with his Jordan Brand shoe deal and is arguing he's not getting the offer he deserves.
Right. So this actually goes back to a March 5th article from Business Insider, which was, I don't know, a month ago. That's probably about when this, Kawhi injury stuff started turning into him being discontented. So, yeah, a month ago, Business Insider reported that Jordan Brand, and Kawhi are having trouble negotiating their new deal. And then what you were just talking about, Nate Robinson now, former NBA player, current analyst, is saying Jordan Brand he's hinting anyway. He's not saying straight out. He's saying like it's a bag of money or some like very thinly veiled analogy that basically Jordan wants him to move out of Texas to a bigger market for his new shoe deal.
And this is what's fascinating. So I'm glad you actually let me get tangent number 1 billion in today, Brian. So we were talking about some back and forth I had on Twitter this week, and I just made a comment that I've made before. It's one of our greatest hits. I think that might be this show's title, our greatest hits or something. I'll try and include a player name. I'm trying to do that for SEO or whatever, Brian, when we make the shows. I'm trying to at least say a team or a player, so it's not something innocuous. So you'll find it on YouTube. It was fantastic. Or finding the Donovan Mitchell fans. They loved us for that. But I was just noting, if you were a fan of the Lakers or the Celtics, and so I think I was responding. I'm just going to say Kelly. Scaletta. He's one of the most amazing Twitter followers on basketball. If you listen to us and don't follow him, I'm confused. Makes fantastic puns. But he was saying a lot of Boston fans have these delusional trade scenarios where they'll say something like, I would definitely trade for Anthony Davis, but I don't know if we could give up a pick and Rozier, or I don't know if we could give up Jason Tatum or whatever. And, the same kind of weird nonsense is coming up now. I'll tie it back to Kawhi. Kawhi's on the block. Arturo on Twitter, American Numbers, was making fun of some people that are saying, I don't know if you can throw that pick in if you want to get Kawhi. And it's like, if a top 5 NBA player, that would be Kawhi, that would be Anthony Davis, is available on the market and they pass their physicals, I swear there is nothing you shouldn't throw at them. The best example, by the way, is the Boston Celtics back in the day for Kevin Garnett. They gave up assets. They gave up picks. They gave up established good players on their team. Top 5 player becomes available on the team. You give up everything. And there are a few players. It's funny. Boston's actually one of these teams where here's what I would say. I got into a discussion about Giannis with a Bucks fan the other day. And it was funny. He said he wouldn't trade Giannis for Ben Simmons. So this was fascinating. Because I was saying most teams I could come up with a trade scenario where I'd be okay giving up Giannis and other stuff if I got the right package back. It would have to include a star, so I want that clear. I would never give up a star for just assets. But, I could say like Giannis plus X for maybe a player I consider worse than Giannis, but like 2 really good play, like a star player and like a good player. I could do something like that. I was saying that. And I said the funny thing is Boston is one of the few teams where there is no combination of players they could offer me for Giannis where I'd accept it. Because we've said this before, there is not a star on that team. Now, maybe Jason Tatum turns into it, but I'm actually going to learn my lesson from some of our more greatest hits from like Landry Fields, from like Matthew Dellavedova, from like Malcolm Brogdon. you can have an outlierish season as a rookie. It usually takes a couple of years before you know what a player is going to be. If they're amazing as a rookie, which both Tatum and Ben Simmons are, you should be really happy. But there is not a guarantee that that player is always going to be great. So it's like if you have an established veteran star and you have a player that isn't already a star, and so that's why Jason Tatum is tough. He looks like he could turn into a star, but I'm saying he's not there yet. Like Ben Simmons is like the only one where like young-ish player, first, second year, where I would have any reservations before trading him. And I probably would not trade Ben Simmons for Kawhi at this point. But like every other one, you got a talented young rookie, and Kawhi is on the floor or on the board, you take Kawhi.
So you mean if you have Ben Simmons, and obviously the salaries don't match up, but it would be some kind of a deal with this package, you would not consider giving him up for Kawhi Leonard. He's that good.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is.
Because I think it's easy to forget Kawhi's last few seasons as he has been injured this season.
That's what I'm saying is he's the only one that I have to think about the deal or try and get something out of.
That's fair.
But that's what I'm saying is like people. I think Snotty Drippin was saying something on Twitter about like Jason Tatum, or who's the other Jason? There are two Jasons on that team.
There's Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum.
You know, he was saying some players don't think that they'd be willing to give him up for like Anthony Davis. It's like, no, I'm like Brown is gone without thinking. I was like Tatum. There's a funny quote from a Star Trek movie that I liked where like he asked Data if he can, like Data's offered this deal by the Borg Queen, and later Picard's like, did you actually consider a deal? Because he does the thing where he says yes, and then he's playing possum, and you know he obviously betrays her at the last second to save the crew. Hurrah! Classic sci-fi trope.
Great summary.
Yeah, but it's a good movie too. So I feel bad. I'm like blah blah blah. Good movie anyway. But like the joke that they use is like, did you consider this? And he's like, I consider it for 0.007 seconds, which is a really long time for an Android. So same kind of point here where it's like, I consider it. I hesitate on Tatum, but I pull the trigger, no questions asked. So I don't have a problem with Kawhi wanting out, and tying it back to like my random tangent. If you're a fan of the Lakers or the Celtics, they have been gifted star players multiple times over their legacies, and they're just these external forces, big markets, players wanting to be in big markets. The NBA, even if they won't explicitly say it aloud, and they should, does realize it is better for them when there are good players in Los Angeles and New York and Chicago. You want good players in those markets. And so it gets even funnier here where if Michael Jordan is like, I'd offer you more, but that market sucks. He is not wrong. Here's two funny markets for differing reasons. Actually, for the same reason, kind of. The Spurs and the Charlotte Bobcats have tremendous basketball fans. The Spurs, because they have one of the winningest dynasties of all time. And the Bobcats, I think, just North Carolina is, it's a mecca for basketball. They have lots of great basketball programs for college. They've had a team. They're both insanely popular. But if you look at the dollar per person down there, those markets just are not good markets. The Spurs can win like title after title, and like if you look at the Forbes valuation, they will crack the top 10, like most valuable teams. And you got to think about that, right? A team that wins like 3 titles in a row. Look at what it did to Golden State. Golden State sold for what, $500 million, $400 million, I think, when LeCobb and crew bought it. Do you recall off the top of your head?
I think it was 450, but yeah, it was in that range, and now they're up near $2 billion, right? And that was only 5 or 10 years ago.
They're now one of the most valuable teams in the NBA, and it's because you brought multiple titles to a California team. That's all you have to do. And by the way, that's very diminutive. By the way, amazing work on the Warriors' part to win multiple titles. But so that's the thing.
Well, that's more of an indictment of the previous ownership, because they were famous for having this huge fan base that still filled up the arena even after decades of losing. So it just took what the current ownership has done is very impressive. But even if they hadn't been this impressive, it still would have been a massive upgrade to the franchise value.
It's funny. Kawhi in Golden State, without the titles, without the rings, without the 51 seasons, is probably better than Kawhi in San Antonio. The Denver Nuggets, I was happy when this happened, by the way, but when Carmelo Anthony went to New York, he knows for a fact scoring 20 points a game in New York on a team, and they did have a couple winning seasons, is much better for his brand and for the NBA than Carmelo Anthony making the playoffs year after year after year in Denver. So it's like, you can't actually say that the Jordan, I don't know if it's Michael Jordan himself, but the Jordan brand shoes You can't say they're wrong. I can't even disagree with them lowballing him and saying, you are the best player on your team, but because it's San Antonio and because of the market size, you will always be considered a utility player under Greg Popovich. That's Greg Popovich's team. It's a small market and shitty. Get yourself into a better market. Any better market works well. And I don't have a complaint with that thinking, with that thought process. And the other thing, so obviously there's a lot of I don't want to call it sketchiness, Brian, but Kawhi's doctors haven't cleared him to return. And it's gotten to the point of comicalness where what I couldn't believe happened, I can't believe that the Spurs followed the Lakers, where you basically have a former MVP, Finals MVP player that may force off the future of the franchise. So what I'm talking about here is Tony Parker has started taking kind of jabbed comments about Kawhi in interviews where I think he said something. He's like, I don't know about Kawhi's injury, but my injury was a lot worse than I'm back here playing. So Tony Parker said that about Kawhi in a public interview. And now people are like, oh, goodness, is Tony Parker forcing Kawhi off? And then, our point was basically Dwight Howard did not re-sign with the Lakers because Kobe Bryant, they wouldn't answer him that, like, it wasn't Kobe Bryant's team anymore. And then, of course, we've heard other free agents, Kevin Garnett is one of them, didn't want to go to the Lakers because of Kobe. So I can't believe that the Spurs are turning into the Lakers, and the Lakers now have like one of the best dynamic young casts. It's weird to see that happen, right? I would not have anticipated the Lakers somehow finding a way to we'll have to see what they do this offseason. There are plenty of ways to screw up a high money free agency offseason, Brian. We've seen the Knicks do it in the past with Amari Stoudemire. But if the Lakers sign two decent free agents, if one of them's LeBron James, the Lakers are going to lap the Spurs, and I did not see that happening with where both franchises were like 3 years ago.
Yeah, and there's so many different factors here. I mean, this is such a weird story. There's a lot of rumors and stuff coming out, so we'll have to see what really ends up happening. I mean, we'll get to the Supermax part of it in a little bit, but just in terms of the desirability of the Spurs for Kawhi Leonard, another part of that Nate Robinson rumor is that he's from California, he's from Los Angeles, Kawhi Leonard that is. And he wants to go back there. He wants to move closer to home. So that's why it's even funnier that all the Boston fans are like, yeah, clearly Boston is closer to Texas than California is. But at the same time, that's got to be a factor, right? And we talked about this with Kevin Durant and Oklahoma City. Like, if you're a young, black, very high-profile celebrity, are you going to want to be in a city like San Antonio or Oklahoma City? Or are you going to want to be out on the West Coast? Like, we don't have to go too deep down the racism trail right now. There's plenty of great people in San Antonio that aren't racist, including, my great family and everything. But let's be honest, like,
wow, family from Texas. Yeehaw.
Let's be real. Like, I haven't heard any rumors about that last part, but I would be surprised if that's not a factor as a California boy myself.
The real important part about Kawhi that I think is worth considering is he did not decide to play for the Spurs. In fact, recall, Kawhi's story is the following. The Indiana Pacers drafted him. There was a draft day deal. George Hill traded for Kawhi. Now, I make fun of it a lot, but I actually got to go back on myself, Brian. I got to correct my incorrect thinking. A lot of people were like, this deal benefits both sides. This was a win-win trade. And I was like, bullshit, because Kawhi became Kawhi. Kawhi was the legitimate rookie of the year, didn't get it because of the exact reason we were just saying about like stupid Donovan Mitchell and how to fool stats. Just minutes and points is how you fool people. He was a legitimate rookie of the year. He turned into a great talent, two-time defensive player of the year, finals MVP, legitimate MVP candidate. It's just that Steph Curry is up there with Michael Jordan. The Steph Curry, LeBron era of MVPs is just kind of like it's hard to compete with, right? There were plenty of good MVP candidates during both of their reigns that just did not get consideration despite the fact they should have. Here's really hoping James Harden gets his this year. But Kawhi did not make a decision about where to go. In fact, he showed the NBA how the NBA worked. His rights were sold. We have talked about, we're talking racism. Let's just go whole hog. It is a messed up system that basically the rights to these athletes are auctioned off regularly. And, people have talked about this, the NFL in particular, but the NBA does it too. If you look at combine photos and compare them to slave auctioning photos, it's not hard to see the fucking similarities. And I'm sorry, it's there. Like, let's point out that there have been problems with race. I was talking about when we're talking Boston as a location, there have been stars in the NBA. You can listen. I believe Bill Russell, but if not Bill Russell, other African Americans that played for the Celtics that were great. It's like they're a star for the team. They have won multiple titles for the city, and they're driving around in a nice car, and they're going to get pulled over by the police because they, it's suspicious for police in Boston if they see a black person driving a nice car. It's like there are problems with race in the NBA. And Kawhi shows the fact he made no decision to play for the Spurs. And despite the fact that they're a great franchise and lots of us are like, why wouldn't you want to play for the Spurs? That's what I think is important to realize. He has had no agency. The way the NBA works, if you don't know, which would be weird if you're listening to the show, but just in case, just a refresher, the way it works is there is a draft lottery. If you want to get into the NBA, you have to go through the draft. The only way you get on an NBA squad without being drafted is if the entire draft passes on you, in which case you become an unrestricted free agent with annoying restraints, like all rookie deals in all leagues, including NBA, are really shitty. So if you're a rookie that wasn't drafted, you're eligible for a first-year deal, which isn't great. And the good news is your extension is slightly better than most draft picks, but still kind of shitty. Once you sign with a team, basically as either an undrafted player, second round pick, or rookie, I think all three scenarios occur. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on the undrafted. They basically get your bird rights, which says if you play for them for 3 seasons, they're allowed to offer you a raise. And they also get your restricted free agency rights on your first deal, which means if another team attempts to sign you, they are allowed to match that team's offer and you play for them as well. And this happened, for instance, with Elton Brand. Elton Brand played for the Los Angeles Clippers back in the day. The Miami Heat wisely tried to give Elton Brand a max deal, and the Clippers matched it. So Kawhi opted out of his deal and said, I'm going to look around the market, but he was a restricted free agent. So his time with the Spurs has never been really his decision because they bought his rights from the Pacers, and then they had the option of matching him. So he agreed to a max with them, but he said, I want to see the free agent market, and then they eventually agreed to a max deal. But essentially that meant there was no better deal he could have signed than the Spurs, and the Spurs basically said, if you sign a better deal, we're just going to match it. So there's nothing you can do. So now that he's on his next extension, he's like, maybe I don't want to play for this team. And we've noted this. Kevin Durant's another fascinating example where how hard would it have been for Kevin Durant to leave the Thunder had they won the NBA Finals? And they probably would have, right? Had they beaten the Golden State Warriors, they probably win that NBA Finals. Michael Jordan wanted out of the Chicago Bulls, and then they won the 1991 NBA Finals, and he stuck around and was loyal. It's like, it's really hard to leave a team, but we should remember there are lots of reasons a player might want to play for a team or for a city beyond this. And what's important, and I'm going to get back to a Dave Barry's greatest hits that you're bringing up with both the shoe deal, and you mentioned, I don't think you mentioned on the show yet, but one of these articles mentions that it might be in Kawhi's best interest to not take a supermax. So
yeah, that's coming up next, yeah.
So if he doesn't sign a supermax deal.
Well, do you want me to do the context first, Ray, before you get into it? So Here's where this came from. The Reddit thread and RNBA about that Nate Robinson rumor we were talking about. And the highest comments here are kind of speculating as to whether or not the extra money he would make from the Supermax versus a non-Supermax is worth the money that he would give up from his shoe contract, right? And then a few posts down here, user James_NY says, basically, according to Bloomberg, he doesn't link it, but with estimates of what players make after they pay local taxes, and Harden came away with 52% of what he was paid because he lives in Texas, while Curry and Blake Griffin were closer to 35%. To break even, Kawhi would have to make around $14 million post-taxes from endorsements, which would necessitate what LeBron does, which is $40 million a year, right? That's roughly what he's going to make during that Supermax. So I don't know if you agree with James NY's assumptions or if you have any other comments about this, Dre.
There's so many places to go, but let's give Dave Barry's greatest hit. So Dave Barry noticed a while back, I'm probably not going to do show notes, but anyway. So he noted that he is a professor of economics at Southern Utah University in Cedar Rapids. Not Cedar Rapids, that's another one, but in Utah. Might be Cedar Rapids. It's Utah though, so it's in Utah. And he mentions it's a small market. It's not a lot of pollution, not a lot of traffic. There are better schools that might pay more for professors because universities work identical to other jobs where you'll get paid more if you're a professor in California or we were talking North Carolina. You should be a basketball coach in North Carolina. But he said, I wanted, when I was weighing where I wanted to teach, I had other factors, including my family, et cetera. This is Dave Barry talking. And so Utah is a fantastic location for me to be a professor. It's a great free market location. Now, the problem the NBA has done, what the NBA has is they have we've been saying max, super max. They have a max contract a player can sign. Now, they have put provisions into the CBA the last couple of times where a team that owns a player's bird rights, that's, in this case, that would be the Spurs. But if a player has played for you for 3 years, or you traded for that player and their contract has been 3 years along, you own their bird rights and you're allowed to sign them to the best deal in the NBA. But ostensibly, the difference between a max contract and others isn't that large. The NBA put a capper. You are allowed to play LeBron James roughly, I believe, 30 plus, somewhere around there, $1 million a season. But here's the funny thing. If you recall, 2 off seasons ago, Mike Conley became briefly in NBA history, the highest paid player in NBA history with, I believe, a 5-year, $150 million contract. And it was because of this max contract point. The most you are allowed to play a player is based on their seniority and if they've played for your team for 3 years, not based on how much teams want to pay them. Now, there is a difference, so that's what we're talking about here. Kawhi giving up a little money to not sign a max contract deal, and there are issues with that. So, for instance, Derrick Rose got a supermax deal. You're allowed to do 5 years on a supermax versus 4, and it's a slightly higher. I think it's 8% versus 6 or 6% versus 4 raise a year. So it is a better deal. But to what we're pointing out, we are now hitting range where for Kawhi to break even on money, he can just start looking at endorsements. We run into another funny position because they're talking year to year. They're saying 14 million endorsements a year. Consider what Kawhi could be worth, what his brand in a city could be worth post basketball in a better market. Now, it's not to say that Tim Duncan and David Robinson aren't beloved, although allegedly David Robinson was carded at a Spurs game recently, so maybe not that beloved. But it's not to say they're not beloved in San Antonio, but think about being a big name in Los Angeles for life and what that means for life. So I think it gets funny. And then also, we're not trying to say break even, right? To Kawhi's point, he could just be saying, I want a combination of more fame, more money, and a better environment. And it's not the case. This is a very popular, problem in computer science. We would call it satisficing. You're not trying to optimize all three. You're trying to wiggle them around to get a good solution in all of them. And these are hard problems that the computers struggle with. So it's funny for people. It's very tempting for analysts like the people on Reddit and like us to just look at one variable, to look at just the money and say he's not optimizing money. But it's like he is a human. He has lots of different things. Even the Spurs have shown that, right? Tim Duncan wanted out. Tim Duncan wanted to go to Orlando and then decided, I think the loyalty of the Spurs is more what I want. LaMarcus Aldridge wanted out. They talked him into coming back. So it's so funny that we look at these athletes and we just try and say they're trying to maximize money, which is very clearly not what all of them are trying to do, especially the great ones, right? We've seen many great players, Kevin Durant as one, that basically said, I'm going to leave money on the table, at least temporarily, to chase a title, to play in a better environment. We've seen that time and time again. So I think Kawhi's in the same position. And I guess the important part coming back to it is I can't fault him for this. He had no agency in playing all of his adult career in this one city. And I don't see a problem with him wanting to go elsewhere. And the same was true with LeBron with the decision, with Kevin Durant with his decision, with Carmelo Anthony with his decision, with Dwight Howard with his decision. We had a lot of decisions. I've had no complaints with that because this is one of the weird areas of the world, at least in the United States, where people are not allowed agency around where they want to work. And people will nitpick your decisions where people make these kind of decisions all the time. Instead of working for Google, you work for a small market startup company because it's got better benefits and, not as hard of a work hour. We've seen that in other places as well.
Yeah, so that Kevin Durant blueprint, Dre, I bet Kawhi is looking at that for sure. He's saying that worked out pretty well for Kevin Durant, even if he is making less money. Maybe, like you said, making the most money is not the most important thing to me, so I'm going to go in that direction. But just to finish this off, in the spirit of going all the way or going whole hog, like whatever you said a little bit earlier, people are talking about in the news right now, it's the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's death. And he didn't just only talk about race, right? He also talked a lot about the war, the Vietnam War at the time, and there is crossover with him, and the anti-Vietnam War protesters. And what were they protesting, for the Vietnam War? It was the draft. They were burning draft cards. Well, in the NBA, it's literally called the draft. It's literally called the same thing. And of course, I'm not trying to say going out to war, playing in the NBA is as bad as going out to war. But, to be this, supposed rich and powerful person, like a star NBA player is, and still having that lack of agency, that's pretty weird and outdated for some, comparing it to something that happened 50 years ago, like the draft card burning.
I can't remember. It's not like whataboutism, but I also hate that too. You're like, this is wrong. And someone's like, well, this similar thing that is much worse happens across the world, right? You're like, there are people starving and, kids aren't getting school lunches, right? Kids aren't getting properly funded school lunches. And they're like, kids around the world are starving. You're like, can we just say both of those are bad? We don't
exactly.
And I actually really hate. I was talking about this too. Let's give another tangent number 1 billion and 2. So the recent Hall of Fame class came through, and 3 players that made it first ballot, and I'm happy for all of them: Jason Kidd, Steve Nash, Ray Allen. Huzzah! And I believe Mo Cheeks is getting in, which is fantastic.
Correct.
Too. And then someone else that I like is on the ballot. But the shame about this for me is that means Ben Wallace got snubbed a second year in a row. But I realized thinking about this, so here's what bugged me. Last year, when Tracy McGrady got in over Ben Wallace, my natural inclination was to start bashing Tracy McGrady. How dare Tracy McGrady go in the Hall before Ben Wallace? Instead of going, you know what, these are both amazing athletes. They both have cases for first ballot Hall of Fame. I shouldn't be mad at them. I should be mad at the overall issue. And in this case, with like the NBA's case, it's undervaluing the wrong things. And also, like, the way the Hall of Fame works, right, is they create false scarcity, right? There's no rule that says they couldn't just it's their own rules, right? So even if they have rules, that always amuses me. They're like, we can't break this rule. And you raise your hand and like, who made the rules? And they're like, well, we did. You're like, like, it's like there's no rule that says the NBA Hall of Fame, the Naismith Hall of Fame, couldn't just say, this season we're going to let in all of these people first ballot because it's too good of a class. Or, for instance, that there were ABA amazing players that were snubbed for years that took forever to get in. There's nothing that they could say. And, you know what? We're going to posthumously, if this makes any sense, not death, but like posthumously in a sense, say all of these ABA MVP players are going to go in at the same time on like, and we're going to count their official induction date as January 1st, 1983, the 5-year anniversary of the death of the ABA, which would, qualify them according to our rules or whatever. They could do that. So it's like, I don't like getting in fights to that degree. So yeah, to your point where we're like, the draft is wrong and it's named after something that we also think is wrong. We can just say both are wrong. It doesn't, like, it's funny to get caught in that little trap of fighting about which bad thing is bad or which great player is the greatest, instead of just saying the benchmark is here. They're both above it. The benchmark is here in terms of badness. They're both below it. We raise our hands. We just say they're both bad. To get it political for the last time, for a bit, hopefully. We might go political more on the show. It's like Trump versus Bill Clinton. I'm fine at this point, and I actually feel really bad. This isn't in terms of, and I'm putting it at just this. There are other things that they're probably related. In terms of being sexual predators and probably and definitely illegal in some cases, and at the bare minimum horrible behavior, both of them are terrible people that are below a standard. We don't need to compete who is worse, Clinton or Trump. I think as a nonpartisan thing, let's raise our hands and say they are both horrible human beings. Both parties made a mistake letting both of them get away with what they did and still letting them hold office. And we need to make that a standard to not be something we accept in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Are you ready for Whiteside?
I have no subtle segue to this, but I'm so glad I didn't see this, Brian. There's so much going on. I've loved this. It's funny, after like 2 shows of repeats, essentially us repeating the same thing back and forth to each other about like the state of the NBA, you and I both had stories that like the other hadn't been fully caught up on. Like, I didn't know this Kawhi shoe thing, and I didn't know this. So I guess I'm going to let you give the context because I read it, but I want to make sure you got it 100% right, meaning I skimmed it, so I'm not going to get it right. But it's Hassan Whiteside bitching essentially about small ball or matchups, which I am such a fan of.
Yeah, so Hassan Whiteside got benched by Eric Spoelstra, and so I've got this Washington Post article up here just kind of describing it. He says he regrets his comments, and this is a typical kind of situation, right? He wants to play. He's really competitive. The coach benches him. He yells he complains, he shouldn't, with a profanity-laced tirade, and and all that stuff, So whatever, that's fine. It seems like a pretty normal story, right? But there's a few things that struck me about it, though, that I want to mention. And the first, obviously, is that we love Hassan Whiteside, right? Andrew especially, and I guess me for that matter. We've always loved Whiteside. The Heat haven't been that great with him necessarily. He was on the Kings still when the Heat was having their big run. So he's never really been on a team that's, been able to show off how good he is. So that's one thing. We do kind of like him, but yeah, so that quote specifically is what caught me. The quote from Whiteside, "Why are we matching up?" is what he said. Man, it's annoying, Why are we matching up? We got one of the best centers in the league, talking about himself in the third party, of course, which is kind of funny. Why are we matching up? A lot of teams don't have a good center. So I feel the same way as him watching the NBA every night. Like, teams with great centers bench their good center at the end of the game, and it can cost them. So, that was one thing about it. He thought that he could have exploited that team's matchups, and he probably could have. But the other thing about it to me was the reaction to it. That it was just kind of universally, well, it was his fault. He shouldn't complain. And the coach didn't get much blame, Spoelstra. And for me, I think it's more of a both sides thing. So it was just weird that everyone piled on Whiteside. I mean, you can say he shouldn't curse out the coach or whatever, but I don't think he was wrong about what he said. He just said it in the wrong direction. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. This is the SB Nation Hot Hoops Heat blog here. The real reason Hassan Whiteside doesn't get clutch minutes has nothing to do with small ball, and it talks about his turnover rate. But that's kind of ridiculous too. Like, he turns the ball over a little bit more than average, but it's not that bad. And why would you bench him for having a bad turnover rate? Like, when he does so much, like, he's one of the top 10 most NBA productive players. You can just not have him handling the ball. He's a center. Like,
it's annoying that a lot of decisions in the NBA are more in response to visceral things people don't like, as opposed to actually crunching the numbers. Because, I talked that point about free throws. I gave credit to Dan Ariely while I said, the reason so many people hate bad free throw shooters is because the way the game is played. They stop the game. Everybody stands still. All eyes are focused on the free throw shooter. They miss. You have to sit and wait for them to get the ball back. They shoot again. They miss. You have to, you get to watch it on the thing. If, even if they make it, it goes to the other team. We slow the pace of the game to slow motion for you to watch this player do this activity they're bad at. Where there are players that are bad at rebounding, there are players that are bad at taking shots, and it's by in a second, right? Donovan Mitchell, the reason people don't realize he's a bad shooter is he takes 17 shots a game, but let's break that down. I keep doing that for a quarter thing. That's 4.5 shots a quarter, roughly, right? 4.25, sorry, apologies, bad math. 4.25 shots a quarter. If he plays an 8-minute stint each quarter, which would be about right, that's one shot every 2 minutes. And the game is going really, really fast. So you have to make a conscious decision to keep track of Donovan Mitchell's shooting, because otherwise the game is by in a blur. I've had this experience too. I went and watched a game with Kevin Love where Kevin Love got injured. He had 17 rebounds. I didn't realize Kevin Love had 17 rebounds. So the stuff we criticize when they're doing turnovers and whatever, it's more of a visceral reaction. I've also just found, if you want to find bad statistics about your player in the NBA, it's not hard to do. I always call this the Brian magnitude test, because someone will say this player in clutch situations only shoots 30%, so we can't have him in the court. And you can go, how often does that happen in the game? How often does that matter? With Hassan Whiteside, the correct clutch maneuver is to say, maybe he's bad, player. I don't think he's a great free throw shooter. Players like Andre Drummond, that are like bad free throw shooters, like, well, you can't have them in the clutch because they get fouled. It's like, well, in the clutch, do they rebound? Do they play defense? Do they pass? So with Hassan Whiteside, the correct clutch question is, in the clutch, for the things he's good at, which are like blocking, defense, close shots, does he do those things effectively? And if so, why would you bench him in the clutch? The last thing you said, the last two, is you said, if you're benching a player to teach them a lesson, but you hurt your team, is that really the ideal thing? And getting exactly back to the draft and the combine and all this stuff, the NBA has this weird system where it's like the players need to shut up and do what they're told. And I agree. We're on Whiteside's side here where we're saying, you know what? Exploiting mismatches is how good teams succeed. The reason the Cavaliers and the Heat were good with LeBron James is they had LeBron James, and you cannot match up with LeBron James, right? LeBron James takes X many shots a game, gets X many passes. You cannot keep up with LeBron James. The right way to win with LeBron James, and we were making fun of, not making fun of, like Ian Levy released an article. It's like, wow, it is interesting. The Cavaliers really do have a playoff mode, and we looked over the numbers, and we're like, well, here's what happens. They play LeBron James 36 minutes in the regular season. They play him over 40 minutes in the playoffs. That's their freaking playoff mode. Right. You play LeBron James. You exploit a mismatch. So Hassan Whiteside's not wrong where he's saying, in the NBA, teams keep trying the small ball material. I'm the best center, and we know this. All the numbers basically say, like, centers are really good at rebounding. Good centers are good at rebounding and good at getting shots close to the rim, and those are the numbers also say this. Threes and shots close to the rim are the only above average shots. They're the only type of shots you would, in an ideal world, like to be taking, which the team that everybody thinks is going to win. I don't know what that was. I tried to make like a shush noise or whatever, Brian, but like as giving a secret, I don't know what it came out as. I'm going to hate myself listening to it in replay. But the Houston Rockets are doing it. They're like the first team taking fewer than 5% of what Ty Willingham calls shit shots. These are mid-range jumpers, and over 50% of their shots from three. It's like, you want to take shots close to the rim, and you want players that are able to get good shots close to the rim. Hassan Whiteside follows that. So we're on his side, and I do like you bring this to attention. It's like, it is just frustrating. This is one of the theses of our show. It is frustrating to see outdated thinking in the NBA when, while there are changes, where there are things we would adapt on a modern NBA team, training, what types of shots, etc., the meat and potatoes of a good big man is really good at helping you win games has been true forever in the NBA. And, even like as noted, the teams that have done really well, I think one player that did not get enough credit clearly for it, Andrew Bogut with the Warriors. They now have Kevin Durant, who counts as a center. I'm sorry, really, like if you look at his size and stuff. LeBron James, like a good big man is good in the NBA. It is so frustrating that people are still bristling about this like 30 years later.
Yeah, just to finish my thoughts on this subject up, I've been talking in the last few months about kind of what is my model for viewing how you win a single NBA game, right? And it has to do with, you're building, there's these different areas where you can generate wins, and each play is a zero-sum game, right? So you can either take efficient shots or gain possessions, and you don't want to give that up yourself, right? Really basic stuff in NBA stats. So like, let's say to win a game, you want to get 100 of any stats, together in aggregate. And if you're a completely balanced team, maybe there's 4 different stats you want to get 25 of each, right? Well, maybe you're not quite balanced and you need to get 40 of one and 15 of another, But just like just tanking the opportunity to compete in those zero-sum situations for big man stats and just saying like, one of those 4, 2 of those 4 categories, we're just going to tank, and not even compete in. It's just not how you win games.
It is frustrating, and I agree. And I mean, that's one reason it's funny to me that more people have not copied the Detroit Pistons that did basically put all their eggs in the defense basket. And it's funny, and it reminds me a lot, for the record, of the 7 seconds or less Suns, which people after the Suns didn't win a title were like, see, this doesn't work. And then the Houston Rockets have come around, and the Golden State Warriors like, why not? So it's like, it does bug me when effective strategies that just follow the simple mantra of maximize points per possession difference in the NBA. That's how you win in the NBA. It frustrates me when you don't see it. And I will say, losing a center matchup in the NBA for any reason is foolish unless you don't like we noted, this was a weird strategy that worked for a while with the Warriors, which is like they'd have a good center. They'd have like David Lee or Andrew Bogut, who we thought were star-ish players, but not quite superstar, and they were also kind of beat up, so they couldn't play full time. Basically, we would say if you take them out of the game, but you bait the other team into taking their center out of the game, and then your small player is better than their small player, that's an effective strategy.
Right.
But I hate so many strategies. Floor spacing is another one, too, where they say this player has to take efficient shots to space the floor to keep the defense on it. I hate strategies that are relying on the opponent to act in a predictable manner. To put this into fun military terms, like this was a game changer in warfare for like the United States, which was The old system was you lined up in 2 rows with muskets pointed at each other. You marched at each other and you like shot muskets, and like whoever killed more won. And like a game changer, like what if we don't line up in a row? What if we fight guerrilla warfare style tactics? It's like, that's my point, is there is nothing that says you have to adhere to these old models of thinking that assume the opponent is going to play the same strategy you are, right? You should change it up so that it doesn't matter what your opponent does. In most cases, you maximize what you can do.
That's the problem with all these zero-sum interactions, is how many diminishing returns there are due to floor spacing and positions, right? So,
and in both those cases, sorry to cut you off immediately, they rely on the opponent acting in a predictable manner for it to be effective. For Kobe to space the floor, one of my favorite players, Shane Battier, was like, I will let Kobe take that contested mid-range jumper, even if it goes in and gets me on SportsCenter getting posterized by Kobe. I will let him take that shot all day. That's the shot we want him to take. So if a defense realizes, I'm going to let you take that shot, and I'm just going to let you keep doing that and respect you as long as you keep taking those shots, so that you don't get those better shots later, then you lose. So it's kind of like, yeah, if you're relying on the defense or offense, depending on what side of the coin you're on, to act in a particular way, and if they don't behave in that way, you lose. I'm never a fan of those strategies.
Yeah, and just to finish up on the diminishing returns, people always come to us and say, well, wins produced and box score stats are bad stats because it says big men are too good, and clearly you don't just want to start 5 big men every game, right? And of course you don't, because there's diminishing returns. You can't put 5 guys under the basket and fight for all these rebounds. You have to have guys on the outside that can do the other things that are important for winning, right? And it's the same thing for small ball. What I'm seeing is the opposite. Teams are going farther and farther towards all we care about is floor spacing, and not the other, areas of zero-sum competition that you need to win in. And the point is, you need all of it. And sure, maybe your team is small and good at floor spacing, or big and good at, big stuff. But it's not just all or nothing. That's all.
But to cut you off there, what I was going to say is,
oh, no, that's okay. I'm done.
You don't need all. You're not wrong. But you need some like the Detroit Pistons weren't good at certain things, but they were good at a couple. But so your point, it's like, yeah, you don't need to put all your eggs, but you need to space it. Ironically, using the word space, you need to space it at least in some, right? You have to have players that are at least competent at doing this. So it's like some teams, yeah, completely give up on the defense game, completely give up on the defensive and offensive rebounding game, right? If you completely give up on the center game with the hopes of this other thing, it's like, that's just, we're never a fan of that. It's like, we're okay saying, okay, maybe a little worse at this thing for this other thing, but it's amazing how many teams just completely give up on a category that they don't need to.
That's right.
All right, I think we got through most. The only last one, I figured you might be interested in this, just a few esports shout-outs. So I'm not 100% sure on this story. This feels like The Onion, so I want to make sure it's real. Tell me if I'm wrong. The NBA just had an esports draft for players that play 2K sports. So they have different 2K teams. And they have drafted various gamers that are getting paid more than G League players are getting paid to play NBA 2K competitively.
I'll be honest, I haven't seen the story, so I'm really interested in reading it. And a side story is I believe Shaq has become a GM in that league, interestingly. So, yeah, the NBA is fully involved here. And there's a huge story on maybe ESPN or Yahoo, I can't remember what, about how Adam Silver said, guys, a few years ago, we're going into esports, and now 13 different NBA teams have like esports holdings. So the NBA has been really successful in esports, but I'd say it's plausible. I need to look into it, but we know that G League players make what, $30,000 or something like that, or $40,000. Esports players in the really big games can make more than that on salary, so it's definitely possible.
So you're clear, if you were picked in the first round, you made $35,000. So you made more. This seems legit. I'm reading a Washington Post article about it. Now, annoyingly, what frustrates me, if you recall, there was, I forget who, there was some good content about esports. Oh, it was a Game Theorist who had some good content about esports and the future of gaming, and I was kind of like, I really like esports because it lets me escape a lot of the ethical quandaries that come with a lot of normal sports. Right? I don't have to worry about head injuries. I don't have to worry about the draft. The NBA is invading esports and implementing a draft, so it's like, that's kind of a shame, where I'm like, these processes I wish would die. I was like excited that esports could start anew and leave these old stupid processes at the door, but it hasn't, unfortunately, in some cases.
And Dre, there is a big controversy about that. The Overwatch League is one of the biggest new esports leagues that's going on right now, and it's very professional. There's a lot of money in it. And that was one of the questions, is will these big money, traditional pro sports related organizations get franchises awarded to them, or is it the grassroots esports organizations that have been around for 10, sometimes 20 years? And that was a big controversy. So yeah, what you're talking about is a big point of friction right now, and I'm not an expert in it, so there you go.
So people did notice that these players are getting paid more than the G League. There's a very obvious reason. It's because the NCAA still exists, and the NBA is in bed with the NCAA. It's not a question, right? Adam Silver pushing for age restrictions, etc., is why the NBA G League is not as competitive as it could be in terms of pay. If the NBA had the stones, they could make a legitimate minor league farm system with the G League and offer good contracts, or allow teams. I would prefer not to draft. I'd prefer you just be able to sign them, but to sign players to contracts to pay in the G League for a lot, and by a lot, we could be talking $50,000 to $100,000 a year. So it's kind of like the reason that you're able to make more money as a gamer than as a professional basketball player with an NBA team at this point, not being in the NBA, like, I'm talking the esports 2K thing or the G League, is that the NCAA still exists. And so that's really the big issue. I don't disagree with people's assessment there, but it is like, it'd be fascinating to see if the NBA was willing to take the G League and say, we're going to make the G League compete with the NCAA. We're going to do what the ABA did back in the day. The ABA, when they were competing with the NBA, they were a much worse league initially. What they did is they said, we are going to do the draft just like the NBA, but we are going to let you draft high schoolers. And so instead of going to college, the NBA forced players to go to college and I believe play all 4 years before coming into the NBA. They said, we will let you come straight into the ABA. There was the Spencer Haywood case where he went to court to argue that he should be allowed to play for the Supersonics, I believe. That was huge. If the NBA wanted to do that with the G League, they could kill the NCAA and make it so that you could actually make money as a minor league basketball player.
Yeah, and it has been getting reported for a little while now that that's what the NBA is moving towards, having direct relationships with high school and having players be able to come directly to the G League. And in fact, in the last couple of weeks, I had this note, but it didn't quite get into their script. A player decommitted from a major school. It might have had to do with some coaching situation, I'm not sure, but that player said, hey, I'm going to the G League instead of committing to a different school.
Oh,
and
nice.
That player also said, I'm doing this for a purpose. I want other people to follow me in those steps. So don't know that player's name off the top of my head, but yeah, it's going in that direction, Dre, for sure.
Well, I mean, and back to Kawhi to wrap this up with the lack of agency. Understand the NCAA is fucking evil. Get me cussing. Where the way it can work is you commit to a school, and then basically the school has your rights. And let's say the reason you commit to a school is the head coach, Rick Pitino or whoever, comes and sits down and says, I love you. You're amazing. You're going to be the starting star. We're going to make it to the Final Four. It's going to be a stepping stone to the NBA. You're great. And you say, awesome. I accept. I signed my letter. Intent day, right? It's for football. At least it's a huge deal in Texas. You go to that school. You get there. It turns out Pitino has recruited 2 other amazing stars. This has been a problem, right, with some of the big teams. They recruit like an NBA draft class, basically, or they recruit like 5 of the top 20 prospects in high school, right? We have data that granular at this point, which is nuts. And they go, look, you're amazing. It's the exact 76ers situation with Julio Okafor, Nerlens Noel, Joel Embiid. They go, there's not room for all of you to play, and we want to see who's the best. Whoever's the best gets the most minutes, but if you're not the best, you're on the bench. And you go, well, fuck it, can I leave? And the school is allowed to say, you are only allowed to leave if we grant you transfer rights, and we don't want to do that. So players don't have agency. So to this G League point, if someone sat him down and said, you just committed to the school based on all of these promises, as soon as your name is on that contract to be at that NCAA school, your situation is crap. The rights to your likeness are still in limbo because of court cases. This is you have no agency. And the NBA isn't much better, but at least the G League might be a little better. And, you'll make a little bit of real money because, college scholarship might be worth $30,000 a year if you wanted a degree from that school and you didn't have any other revenue of making tuition, which is not true for virtually anybody that could get accepted into a $30,000 a year school. So it's kind of like, I agree with that. That would be fascinating. I hope it takes off, candidly.
Yeah, and let's bear in mind Ed O'Bannon, who had one of the original lawsuits for his likeness being used without his permission in college basketball video games. What was the result of that? Well, they just said, all right, well, we're just going to stop making the games, basically. So he didn't get any money, really. Anyway, that's not a perfect example of what happened, but,
Yeah. Okay, let's give the last. Let's just take us into shoutouts, because that leads us to one of your shoutouts and my shoutouts. You showed me this. I didn't watch it for too long because I'm old. But Ben Simmons and Karl Anthony Towns were playing. What was the game, Brian?
I think they're playing PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, PUBG, very popular game right now. But I just thought it was really interesting that Ben Simmons and Karl Anthony Towns have both been streaming on Twitch for like 6 months, and it's been very under the radar. They've been getting some viewers, but not a lot. So, yeah, they're out there directly chatting with the fans. It seems kind of like a interesting like PR thing. Like maybe something weird will come up from that, but good on them. That's awesome.
And what I'll say, this is the funniest result of that I heard. I think you told me this, right? Because it's getting little fanfare, the Twitch stream is actually readable. So for those of you who don't know, Twitch is a live streaming platform to watch people play video games or whatever. There's a chat room going on alongside, and if it's really popular, it's going really fast. I know YouTube does something like this. Like if you want to get noticed by the person running, like you can donate money so it'll actually alert them. But if you're just chatting, that you just have to hope that they see you.
That's right.
And so somebody said, Karl Anthony Towns, very collegey. That's what you and I said. I said what was fascinating looking at the setup is watching Ben Simmons play on Twitch I was like, it reminds me of me being in college. Then I have to remind myself, Ben Simmons is the same age I was when I was in college. So these are college students, which is funny. With the amount of criticism, praise, whatever we heap on these young players, it's important to remember they are like those of us that just did the standard college thing, like same age, same immaturity, etc. But Karl Anthony Towns said, I've got to go to bed. I'm playing Brooklyn tomorrow. And someone says, no, you can stay up late. You're playing Brooklyn tomorrow. So yeah. I thought that was hilarious.
Great for memes. Well, I'm sure we'll see more.
All right. So you have another few shout outs. I'll let you get those in.
I do. Yeah. One of my shout outs is related to something we talked earlier. It's a little bit meta, but Jessica Luther wrote that great article about women's sports, including, the Notre Dame victory in the NCAA tournament. And she got shouted out for that article also on Twitter by Billie Jean King, yes. Of course, who had that famous tennis match. There's even a movie about it recently. And she was really happy about that. So good job, Jessica Luther, both for the article and getting shouted out by Billie Jean King. That's awesome. And then I did have one more shout out, which was, this is one of my favorites too. All the Hall of Famers, of course, from this class, like we were talking about, Steve Nash and Jason Kidd, especially two great all-time great players. But the non-players also went into the Hall of Fame, the contributors, and one of those is Rick Welts, the first openly gay executive, and he came out in 2011 and has been working for teams like the Sun, the Warriors since then. But he's been working in the NBA since 1969 and has had all kinds of contributions. He worked for the league for a long time as well.
1969, he does not look that old. Jeez.
He was a ball boy apparently at the beginning. So yeah, he was involved in things like the NBA All-Star Weekend, building that up. So he's been involved with the game for a long time and just, working as an open league gay member. Now he's in the Hall of Fame. That's great. So good job, Rick Welts. All right. And that's all my shout outs. Yeah. That's
perfect. Those are some great shout outs. And I just cheated and wrote on your coattail for one because you showed it to me in the beginning anyway. So I wouldn't have known about it was not for you. But anyway, that's been our show. If you find us not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. And occasionally I do write-ups at nerdnumbers.com. I've been so busy. We'll see if I start writing there normally again. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez. You can find me everywhere as Nerd Numbers. You're going to hear Nerd Numbers a lot in this outro, so let's just keep going. Co-host, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster. You can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. You can find our show on iTunes and Stitcher, the Boxscore Geek Show. We go live every week. A funny story. Usually we're trying to do Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers. We did Wednesday again this week because I actually went to a bar with some friends to watch the Bucks game and talk about the Bucks. So we didn't do a podcast talking about sports for me to actually go to a bar and watch sports and talk about sports. So Apologies for that. And then if you missed the live show, you can catch the recaps on channel Nerd Numbers at youtube.com/Nerd Numbers. I think I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, that's been our show. We'll catch you next week.